While hurriedly walking down the busy city street, lawyer Fernanda suddenly found herself paralyzed. In front of her, a humble street vendor displayed a watch identical to the one her deceased boyfriend used to wear 2 decades ago. A bouquet of fresh flowers complemented the scene, evoking painful and emotional memories simultaneously. In an instant, she felt a tightness in her chest, an unexpected connection to the past. Holding her trembling arm, Fernanda found herself facing a unique opportunity, the possibility of solving a mystery that had haunted her for years. During a golden late afternoon, the sun's rays tinged Fernanda's path with warm tones as she drove back home, her mind oscillating between the day's fatigue and the painful memories that haunted her. The familiar road seemed longer than ever since Paolo, her great love, had been abruptly taken from her in a devastating car accident. The void left by his departure only grew when, shortly after, Fernanda discovered she was pregnant, only to give birth to a baby who never cried in her arms. These losses had turned Fernanda into a solitary figure, wrapped up in her career as a lawyer as if it were a shield against the pain. But on one particular afternoon, while patiently waiting at a traffic light, a scene caught her by surprise. A young man with soft features held a bouquet of withered flowers. His deep, sad eyes met hers for a brief moment, as if they shared a silent understanding of the losses each carried. The ticking of a watch on the young man's wrist echoed in Fernanda's mind as the light turned green, forcing her to move on. But her mind remained stuck on that fleeting encounter, echoing in the quiet of her home when, at night, she delved into paperwork illuminated by the soft light of her desk lamp. The image of the young man returned incessantly, as if fate had whispered a call in her ears. Determined to understand more about that encounter, Fernanda returned to the same traffic light the next day, but the young man was not there. She searched among the local vendors, but none had any clues. Her search led her to the police station, where she faced a cold and bureaucratic environment that contrasted with her determination, warmed by the desire to find answers. After a tense wait, a robust and weary police officer confirmed that the young man had recently been removed due to complaints from drivers. The frustration of not having found the young man again mixed with Fernanda's renewed determination. She knew she couldn't give up now, not after feeling that something bigger was at stake. Even without clear leads and facing an uncertain future, Fernanda decided to press on with her search. She knew that correcting her mistake of not seeking the young man earlier was more than a duty. It was an opportunity to find a new purpose beyond the cold walls of the courtroom and the endless contracts. On that sunny day, the bustling streets vibrated with the typical hustle and bustle of the big city. Fernanda, with her usual determination, walked through the unfamiliar neighborhood in search of the young flower seller. Each corner turned increased her anxiety, but also fueled her hope of finally solving the mystery that had intrigued her for weeks. Upon spotting him, Fernanda's heart skipped a beat. The young man, with his colorful flowers and captivating smile, seemed unaware of the impact he had on those who observed him. However, as she approached, his demeanor abruptly changed. A shadow of fear crossed his face, and he began to quickly move away. "Please wait," Fernanda shouted, desperate not to let her only concrete clue slip away. She reached the young man, gently holding his arm, trying to convey calmness and understanding. "I just want to talk to you." The young man hesitated for a moment, his eyes searching for an escape route in the crowded streets. Finally, resigned, he sighed deeply and began to share the story behind the watch he wore so carefully. "This watch was a gift from my grandfather," he began, his voice filled with emotion. "He told me it was special, that I should take good care of it. My grandfather used to say it was a magical watch, bringing luck to whoever wore it, and that one day I would meet someone important who would need it." Fernanda felt a lump form in her throat. The young man's words touched a part of her that had long been dormant. "My name is Fernanda," she said softly, her eyes welling up. "And that watch belonged to my grandfather too. He used to tell me similar stories about it." The young man's eyes widened, a mixture of surprise and fascination crossing his face. He realized that this encounter was not just a coincidence of fate, but something much bigger. For hours, they talked there, sharing stories about their grandfathers, discovering surprising similarities in their lives and experiences. From that day on, a unique and special friendship began to blossom between Fernanda and the young flower seller. They learned that destiny sometimes guides us along unexpected paths, bringing to light connections that transcend time and space. The watch, now more than ever, represented not just a valuable object, but a link between past and present, between two souls that, somehow, were destined to meet. Jorge looked at Fernanda nervously when she insisted on knowing about the mysterious watch. He wasn't used to sharing this story with strangers, but the determination in her eyes made him reconsider. "Please, Jorge, I will do anything to uncover the truth," Fernanda said, her voice trembling with emotion. "This watch could be the key to unraveling the past of someone I loved very much." The sincerity in her words deeply moved Jorge. Taking a deep breath, he agreed to tell, but with one firm condition. "You need to promise that you will return the watch." Fernanda quickly nodded, understanding the importance of the object to Jorge. He led her to a quieter corner and handed her the watch. "My name is Jorge," he began, his shoulders relaxing a bit. "This watch is the only memento I have of my father." As Fernanda held the watch carefully, she noticed an inscription on the back, the letter P, exactly like Paulo, the man she believed had disappeared years ago. Her heart raced with the discovery, but she remained calm as she asked Jorge, "You said it was your father's. What else can you tell me about him?" Jorge seemed reluctant at first, as if he were delving into painful memories. "My father died before I was born," he began. "My mother, Dolores, held on to this watch as if it were the last connection to him. When she got sick, I almost sold the watch to pay for her expensive medicine." Upon hearing the name Dolores, Fernanda felt a chill run down her spine. Could it be possible that Dolores, Jorge's mother, had some connection to Paulo? She needed to investigate further. "Do you know anything about her past? Any connection to someone named Paulo?" Fernanda asked, trying to keep her voice steady despite the torrent of questions in her mind. Jorge frowned, confused. "Paulo? I don't know anyone by that name," he replied. "My mother was always reserved about her past. She never mentioned anything about a Paulo." Determined to get answers, Fernanda decided she needed to speak with Dolores personally. She felt a mixture of intense emotions as she prepared to confront the woman who might have connections to the mystery of Paulo. Jorge, hesitant and worried about his sick mother, finally gave in to Fernanda's insistent request, handing over the address with a distrustful look. "Promise you won't cause any trouble?" he asked, passing the watch to her hands, convinced by the sincerity in her eyes. "All right, let's go," Jorge agreed, and the two got into the car. As Fernanda drove to his house, her heart raced with apprehension. When they arrived, Fernanda knocked on the door with anticipation, but silence was the only response. Impatient, Jorge opened the door, which was merely ajar. The scene that unfolded before them was striking. Dolores, a shadow of the powerful woman Fernanda had imagined, lay on a makeshift bed in the living room, frail and aged. Fernanda's heart filled with an overwhelming mix of anger and compassion at seeing Dolores in such a weakened state. Without thinking, Fernanda determinedly advanced towards Dolores, while Jorge, in a mix of shock and protection, tried to intervene. "She's sick. Don't do this," exclaimed Jorge, firmly holding Fernanda, who, overcome by fury, ended up hurting his arm by pulling him forcefully. Sensing her son's distress and the intensity of Fernanda's emotions, Dolores, with a trembling and pleading voice, asked Jorge to let her speak. "She needs to vent," murmured Dolores, looking with tired eyes at Fernanda. Jorge, still reluctant and confused, positioned himself between the two women, trying to mediate the rising tension. Fernanda, after taking a deep breath to control her rapid breathing, stared at Dolores intensely. "Tell the truth," she demanded, crossing her arms in a gesture of determination. With a heavy sigh, Dolores began to reveal her obsession with Paulo, the driver who worked in her house. She confessed to using her influence and fortune to keep him by her side, depriving him of the right to be with Fernanda. The shocking revelation left Fernanda stunned. "You did that to him?" she asked, disbelief coloring her words. Jorge, next to his mother, looked on with a mixture of compassion and indignation, struggling to understand Dolores' motivations. Jorge looked at Fernanda with a mix of worry and confusion. He knew she was very distressed about his sick mother and, despite his reluctance, ended up giving her the address. "Please, don't cause any trouble," Jorge asked, passing the watch to Fernanda. "All right, let's go," he finally agreed, giving in to her request. Together, they got into the car, and Fernanda drove to his house, her hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. When they arrived, Fernanda knocked on the door several times, but the silence inside the house was deafening. Jorge, impatient, slowly opened the door, revealing the interior. What they saw left them stunned. Dolores, once an imposing lady and now frail and sick, lay on a makeshift bed in the living room. Fernanda felt a wave of conflicting emotions upon seeing her in that state. Without a second thought, Fernanda advanced towards Dolores, determined to confront her, while Jorge tried to hold her back. "She's sick. Don't do this," exclaimed Jorge, firmly holding Fernanda, who, overwhelmed by anger, ended up hurting his arm with her strength. Dolores, seeing Jorge's distress, asked him to let her speak. "She needs to vent," murmured Dolores, her voice trembling and weak. Jorge remained between the two women, trying to ease the growing tension in the room. Fernanda, after taking a deep breath to calm her nerves, looked intensely at Dolores, now so different from the authoritative figure she had always imagined. "Tell the whole truth," demanded Fernanda, her voice choked with intensity. With a heavy sigh, Dolores began to recount her love story with Paulo, the house driver. She admitted to doing terrible things to keep him away from Fernanda, a confession that left the young woman completely shocked. "You did that to him?" asked Fernanda, her eyes filling with tears, while Jorge looked at his mother with a mix of compassion and perplexity. Dolores continued her confession, guilt weighing on every word. She explained how she discovered Fernanda's pregnancy and decided to hide the truth from Paulo. "I knew he would try to come back to you," murmured Dolores, full of regret, "and that's when I committed terrible acts." A painful silence filled the room as everyone processed Dolores' revelations. Fernanda felt overwhelmed by an overpowering mix of anger and sadness. "You destroyed our lives, Dolores. You stole our future," she said, her voice choked with deep pain. Dolores continued her narrative, revealing how she bribed people to lie about Paulo's death and about Fernanda's baby, a revelation that broke the hearts of everyone present. "I did horrible things," admitted Dolores, tears streaming down her aged face. Finally, after years of closely guarded secrets, everything came to light. Dolores could no longer hide the truth that had tormented her for so long. She looked at Jorge, her eyes brimming with regret, while the words weighed heavily on her mouth. "I was selfish, Jorge, even cruel. I was obsessed with the idea of having Paulo all to myself. I thought that if you found out the truth, I would lose you too. But now I see how wrong I was," she confessed, her heart heavy. Fernanda, Jorge's mother, stood nearby, feeling an overwhelming mix of anger, sadness, and a small spark of hope. "So, Jorge, you are my son. My son is alive," she exclaimed, holding Jorge's hand to comfort him amidst the avalanche of revelations. Jorge, trying to process everything, felt a whirlwind of emotions. I don't know what to say. My whole life has been a lie," he murmured, stepping back slightly when Dolores tried to approach him. "I'm sorry, Jorge. I thought I was doing the right thing, but now I see I was wrong. Please, forgive me," pleaded Dolores, her eyes filled with tears. Fernanda remained by Jorge's side, holding his hand firmly. "Dolores, tell us everything. What happened to Paulo?" asked Fernanda, her voice choked with emotion. Dolores took a deep breath, recalling those painful days. "A few days after your birth, I was holding you in my arms when I went to Paulo. I told him that you had been abandoned at my doorstep because I didn't have the means to raise you," she confessed, the remorse evident in every word. Fernanda felt a mix of indignation and sadness upon hearing this, but she knew she needed to hear the whole truth. "And Paulo, did he believe you?" she questioned, trying to understand the details of this complex story. Dolores shook her head, her eyes welling up. "No, he didn't believe me. Paolo thought it was just another one of my lies. He tried to escape several times, but I had security guards at the house to prevent his escapes, she explained, her voice thick with guilt. I just wanted him to believe me, to accept you as his son. Dolores continued, visibly shaken by the painful memories resurfacing. Jorge, still trying to absorb everything, asked curiously, and then, what happened to him? Dolores looked at Jorge with a deeply regretful expression. Paolo slowly began to develop a bond with you. He saw much of Fernanda in you, which helped him endure the absence of her in his life, she recounted, her voice heavy with remorse. Fernanda felt a deep pain hearing this. So, Paolo was trapped at home, living a lie. And then? She pressed, needing to understand every detail of this story that so deeply affected their lives. Dolores took a deep breath before continuing, her hands trembling slightly. Over time, Paolo began to nurture a genuine love for you. He cared for you with all his heart, even knowing the lies I had told, she confessed, a lump in her throat. And in one of his desperate attempts to escape, Paolo tried to take you with him. The security guards intercepted him again, Dolores said, closing her eyes for a moment, reliving that painful moment in her mind. When I had the power to do whatever I wanted at that moment, I didn't believe in myself, but I decided to let him go. Before that, I committed one last cruel act. Dolores' eyes filled with tears as Paolo packed his things to leave. I stealthily took the luxury watch he had inherited from his family and fled with Jorge to my family's country house, where we stayed for months. I knew that separating father and son would cause Paolo great pain. When he found out, I felt a wave of indignation and sadness. Paolo desperately searched for Jorge in the years that followed, but never found him. I raised Jorge as my son, hiding the truth about his past. As I grew older, I lost my fortune. The only valuable item I had left was Paolo's watch, kept as a reminder of my control over him. When I finally revealed the truth to Jorge, he couldn't understand how I could lie all these years about his father and his story. Dolores was visibly guilty. She admitted her obsession and the terrible mistake she had made. I never wanted you to suffer, she murmured through her tears. Jorge, emotional, confronted Fernanda as well. How could you become so cruel? He asked, remembering the times she had hurt him unknowingly. Fernanda broke down in tears, realizing the monster she had become. I was blinded by anger and pain, she admitted. I just wanted to find answers. Jorge wanted to accept her apologies, but the pain was still strong. We were all victims of Dolores' lies, Fernanda reminded him, trying to redeem herself. Moved, Jorge took a step toward Fernanda. Both had been hurt by the situation, but he felt compassion. It's not your fault, he said gently. We can start over. With tears in her eyes, Fernanda finally found the courage to hug Jorge, full of pain and hope. My son, I'm so happy you're alive, she said sincerely. We'll face this together. Let's find Paolo and try to rebuild our lives. Jorge felt the weight of her words in his heart and approached Dolores, ready to start forgiving. The sun was already dipping toward the horizon when Fernanda parked the car in front of the modest house on the outskirts of town. She looked at Jorge beside her, whose eyes reflected an intense mix of nervousness and hope. The house ahead seemed simple, but it was laden with meaning. It was there they might find Paolo, the father Jorge barely remembered, but whose absence had always weighed on his heart. As Fernanda took a deep breath to gather courage, Jorge opened the car door with renewed determination. Each step toward that door echoed years of searching and unanswered questions. He felt his heart pounding in his chest, and his choked voice seemed to hold back every word he wanted to say. When he knocked on the door, the sound reverberated through the calm afternoon air, creating almost palpable tension. Every second that passed felt like an eternity until the door finally opened. On the other side stood an older man with tired eyes that instantly lit up at the sight of Jorge standing there. Paolo blinked a few times as if processing the vision before him. A trembling smile broke across his lips as he recognized the son he had lost so long ago. "Jorge," he murmured, unable to contain the emotion that overtook him. Tears welled up in Paolo's eyes, witnesses to the whirlwind of feelings consuming him at that moment. "Jorge," with a trembling voice, confirmed his identity, feeling a mix of relief and happiness that nearly took his breath away. "Yes, it's me, your son. I finally found you, Dad," he said, the words laden with years of waiting and longing. Without words, Paulo stepped forward and embraced Jorge tightly, as if fearing the moment might vanish. It was an embrace that transcended lost time and accumulated hurts. It was an embrace that said more than any words could express. Love, forgiveness, redemption. Fernanda, watching from the doorway, felt her heart warm at the scene before her. It was the moment she had longed to witness, the reconciliation of father and son. Tears of gratitude rolled down her cheeks as she realized that the moment was not just about Jorge and Paulo, but also about herself. It was about forgiveness and the chance to start anew. The sun slowly dipped into the horizon, casting a golden light over that emotional reunion. It was as if the universe was smiling upon them, blessing the new beginning unfolding in that magical moment. Jorge looked at Fernanda, his eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you for never giving up on me, for bringing me back home," he said sincerely, his words filled with genuine emotion. Fernanda nodded, her voice lost in a sigh of relief and contained joy. She knew there was much to repair, many conversations to be had, but this was the beginning of a new story for all of them, a story of love, forgiveness, and renewed hope. As night enveloped the small house and the three gathered to share stories and lost memories, they knew they were united not only by blood but by a bond of affection that time and distance could not break. The car, now parked silently outside, was more than a physical vehicle. It was a symbol of an emotional journey that had brought them there, a tangible reminder of how love can overcome all adversities. Together, they would face whatever the future held, side by side as a true family, ready to embrace each new dawn with courage and determination. Fernanda's heart pounded as she drove, feeling a mix of love and relief. In the rearview mirror, she saw Paulo and Jorge embracing. Tears streamed down her face as she witnessed that emotional scene. It had been so long since Paulo approached the car with eyes full of anxiety, watching her through the glass. When their eyes met, emotions overflowed, and they ran into each other's arms, crying with joy and relief. "Paulo, I can't believe it's you," said Fernanda, her voice choked with emotion. "I'm so happy to see you," murmured Paulo. As their tears mingled, they hugged tightly, as if trying to merge into one. The intensity of the moment made them both realize they still loved each other deeply, despite the years of separation and suffering. "Fernanda, I thought you had abandoned me along with our son," said Paulo, trying to process the reality of having her there in his arms. Fernanda shivered at his words. "And I thought you were dead," she confessed, her voice trembling. Paulo frowned, confused. "Dead? But I thought you had left Jorge at Dolores' door because you couldn't take care of him." An ironic smile appeared on Fernanda's lips. "Paulo, I didn't leave Jorge at Dolores' door. I thought you had died. She set everything up to make me believe you had an accident. She separated us, Paulo. She deceived us and made us believe in lies." Paulo was stunned by the revelation. A nervous laugh escaped his lips, followed by tears of relief. "So we were deceived all these years by that damned woman." Fernanda nodded, feeling the weight of the stories they were prevented from living due to Dolores' cruelty. They laughed together but soon began to cry, sharing the burden of the past and the hope for a better future together. Wiping away the tears, Paulo looked into Fernanda's eyes with admiration and overflowing affection. "Fernanda, you've become an even more beautiful woman than I remembered. If I met you today, I would surely fall in love with you again," said Paulo, making Fernanda's heart race with a mix of emotions. She smiled, her eyes shining with the sincerity of his words. "Paulo, you always have been and always will be the love of my life." They held each other's hands in a gesture of tenderness and reconnection. Fernanda paused to wipe away a stubborn tear that ran down her cheek before continuing. It was the culmination of years of waiting, of internal and external struggles, of obstacles overcome, and of a love that stood the test of time. For decades, Fernanda dedicated herself tirelessly to her work, seeking to fill the void left by Paolo's absence. She always believed that no one could take his place in her heart. However, life had a surprising twist in store for her. When Paolo finally reappeared, everything changed. Fernanda's eyes shone with a mix of disbelief and joy upon seeing him again, as if time had reversed to bring back her great love. Paolo, gently holding Fernanda's face between his hands, felt a wave of emotion and relief. "We've lost so much time, Fernanda," he murmured tenderly. "But now that we've found each other again, nothing will separate us." Their hearts united in that moment, as if the universe were conspiring to seal the love that never faded. Meanwhile, Jorge watched from afar, his eyes fixed on the couple now embracing with renewed passion. He could hardly believe he was looking at his biological parents, finally united. The feeling of belonging, of finding his true family, was overwhelming. With an emotional smile, Jorge approached and joined the embrace, feeling the warmth and comfort of finally being home. "You are my parents," Jorge murmured, his eyes brimming with genuine happiness. "I will always love you." Paolo and Fernanda enveloped Jorge in a warm embrace, sharing not only the present moment but also the weight of the past. Jorge then shared his journey with Dolores, revealing the layers of lies and manipulations that had marked him since youth. He described the devastating impact of discovering the truth about his origins and Dolores' cruel attempts to keep them apart. Listening attentively, Paolo and Fernanda felt a torrent of emotions flood their hearts. Anger at the injustice suffered and determination to seek justice. "She cannot go unpunished for all this," Paolo declared firmly. They were ready to act, to bring Dolores to justice and ensure she paid for her actions. But before they could take the first step, Jorge interrupted with a sincere and unexpected plea. "Please, do nothing against her," Jorge implored with a choked voice. "Despite everything, she raised me with love. Now she is old and sick. I believe we should let her live her last days in peace." Jorge's words echoed in the tense silence that followed, bringing to light a deep moral dilemma for everyone. Paolo and Fernanda exchanged looks full of mutual understanding. They understood Jorge's anguish and recognized the complexity of the situation. Forgiving Dolores wouldn't be easy, but they knew it was the path to inner peace and family reconciliation. After a long and contemplative pause, Paolo and Fernanda nodded in silence, accepting Jorge's decision. They deeply respected his feelings and understood that, for Jorge, forgiveness was essential to move forward and build a better future. It was the first step towards healing years of pain and separation. A year passed since that day of intense revelations and overwhelming emotions. Paolo and Fernanda finally found the love and stability they had longed for. In a wedding ceremony full of meaning, they renewed their vows and celebrated their union in front of friends and family. Each moment of that celebration symbolized not only the union of two hearts, but also the achievement of a tumultuous journey that had brought them there. For the couple, that day represented more than just an event. It was the promise of a future where love and family would be the foundations of their lives, where the scars of the past would bear witness to the strength of their love and the resilience of their souls. Paolo and Fernanda decided to unite their lives in a marriage that represented not just a commitment but the promise of a bright future. For Fernanda, each step towards the altar was like leaving behind the shadows of a painful past and embracing a new beginning filled with love and hope. In the first months after the wedding, they faced challenges that tested their determination and mutual love. Together, they overcame the difficulties of the past, learning to trust each other again. Every day with Paolo was a journey of rediscovery for Fernanda, where she found comfort and support in difficult moments and smiled with him in happy times. Over time, Fernanda blossomed into a more radiant version of herself. Her contagious joy and determination inspired not only Paolo but also the entire team where she worked. Her innovative approach and commitment to excellence not only elevated the business but also created a more positive and collaborative work environment. The success of Fernanda's success did not go unnoticed by Paolo, who saw in her not only his wife but also a source of inspiration and admiration. He, who had always been a hardworking man, found in Fernanda not just a profound love, but a reason to rethink his priorities. Deciding to leave his previous job, Paulo wanted to enjoy life more by her side, creating precious memories and sharing experiences that once seemed distant. Meanwhile, Jorge, Fernanda's son, found in Paulo a loving and dedicated father. With the warm support of both, Jorge felt secure enough to explore new possibilities. He left his previous job and focused on his studies, dreaming of entering college. In his spare time, Jorge meticulously tended to the house's garden, a hobby that not only expressed his gratitude but also strengthened family bonds. On weekends, Jorge set aside special time to visit Dolores, an elderly woman at the town's nursing home. Known for her kindness and goodness, Dolores found comfort in Jorge's presence, who dedicated his time to listening to her stories and offering her company on her lonelier days. Despite the ghosts of the past haunting her, Dolores found solace in Jorge's affectionate presence, who, despite his youth, showed rare and mature compassion. Thus, while Fernanda discovered new horizons of personal and professional fulfillment, Paulo and Jorge each found, in their own way, meaning and purpose in their new life together. The home they built was not just a physical space but a refuge of love, mutual support, and continuous growth. Dolores' journey of forgiveness and love. Dolores' story is one of forgiveness and love. She carried a tremendous weight from her past mistakes, knowing she had hurt many people, including Jorge. This feeling of guilt did not leave her in peace, even as time passed. Jorge, on the other hand, never gave up on Dolores. He was always there, offering his unconditional love and support. He hoped that one day she would find peace, even if she couldn't undo the mistakes of the past. Meanwhile, Paulo and Fernanda, with broken hearts, decided to move on without seeing Dolores again. They trusted Jorge to take care of her, recognizing the power of the love and forgiveness he offered. Jorge became a ray of sunshine in Dolores' life, bringing comfort and care during her difficult days. As everyone dealt with their own emotional pain, Paulo, Fernanda, and Jorge together built a new life based on love and trust. Over time, the wounds of the past began to heal, giving way to serenity and acceptance. The love between them prevailed over the shadows of the past, promising a brighter future. And so, together, they formed a new family, ready to face any challenge that destiny had in store. Love and compassion triumphed over sadness and paved the way for a life of hope and happiness. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the story. The Narrated Experiences channel thanks you for your company. Don't forget to leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and comment on what you thought. See you in the next exciting story.